Hi everyone, welcome back. This is the second video and we're talking about moral realism. So moral realism is the view that moral rules are objective universal truths that apply to everybody. So moral rules are objective, meaning that they're out there in the world. They're not up to us in any sense. We could, at least in principle, all be wrong about morality. Moral rules exist independent of our beliefs about them. The way gravity exists independent of our beliefs about gravity. Even if none of us believed in gravity, it would still be there holding us down. You can't learn to fly around without gravity by just believing really hard that there's no gravity. No matter what you believe, gravity's there. Moral realists think that moral rules work like gravity in that sense. No matter what you believe, no matter what you think about it, they're just there. The moral rules are there and they apply to you whether you believe in them or not. And so that's, in that sense, they think moral rules are objective. But they also think moral rules are universal, meaning they apply to everyone, always, no matter what. So moral truths are a bit like mathematical truths on the moral realist view. Like mathematics isn't physical. You can't go out and touch numbers. You can't go out and measure numbers with instruments. If you learn like group theory and matrices, you can't go out in the world and find a group in the mathematical sense of group. Like it's not a physical thing that you can discover empirically, the way you discover, new animals in biology or new elements in chemistry. But math is still there, out there in the world, and we can discover mathematical truths with proofs. We prove things. Mathematical truths are sort of built into the world, and they're objective. They're not up to us. We can't change what is mathematically true. No matter how hard you believe that 2 + 2 = 5, it just doesn't. 2 + 2 = 4. If everyone on Earth believed that there was a greatest prime number, then everyone on Earth would be wrong. There isn't a greatest prime number. Mathematical truths are not physical truths, but they're still objective truths out there in the world. They're independent of what we believe about math. We can discover the mathematical truths, and they're unaffected by our opinions. And moral realists think that moral truths work like that, right? Math applies to everybody. 2 + 2 = 4 for everybody. Morality, moral realist thinks, applies to everybody, and it's objective and out there in the world, even though it's not physical and you can't find out about it empirically. You can still make moral discoveries kind of the way you make mathematical discoveries, with arguments. The mathematician uses proofs, which are just formal arguments, and the moral theorist, the ethicist, makes moral discoveries by producing arguments to find out new moral claims based on moral claims we already accept. And that's how the moral realist thinks morality works. It works like math. It's not empirical, it's not physical, but it's still built into the world. It's out there independent of what we believe and what our opinions are. And we can't affect it or change it. Changing our opinions doesn't change the truth. And moral truths don't change when our beliefs about them change, according to the moral realist. So moral truths are objective and universal, meaning they apply to everyone regardless of opinions and beliefs, regardless of where or when you grew up, regardless of your society or culture. Morality is the same for everyone always, and it is objective and real, the way math is objective and real. So for example, in the trolley problems, the moral realist says there is one correct answer to the trolley problem. Either you should pull the lever or you should not pull the lever. If two people disagree about what to do, if you think you should pull the lever and your friend thinks you should not pull the lever, then one of you is wrong. One of you is incorrect. One of you believes that it's a moral fact that you should pull the lever or that you should not pull the lever. And that's just not a moral fact. The fact is you shouldn't or you should. Either way, whichever one of you is right, whichever one of you is wrong, the moral realist thinks one of you is right and one of you is wrong. There's no sense in which you can both be right or both have your own opinion or be entitled to your own view on this. The moral realist thinks you're not. There is one right answer, and either you have the right answer or you have the wrong answer. There's no third option. Every moral question has one right answer, and any other answer is wrong. So if you really should, if the utilitarians are right, and you really should push the person off the bridge to save 5 people in the bridge version of the trolley problem, then not pushing them off the bridge is morally wrong. And if you think that you shouldn't push the person off the bridge, then you are factually incorrect about the case, according to the moral realist utilitarian. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a real fact in the world that you are either right or wrong about. So that's moral realism. And that's, for a lot of people, the default view, because morality intuitively seems like a real thing. It doesn't feel like we made it up. It feels like that, donating to charity is morally good. Being a Nazi is morally bad. And that's it. The Nazi and Mother Teresa don't just have a difference of opinion. One of them's right, one of them's wrong. For a lot of people, that's sort of the default view. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people, moral realism is sort of the default view. But one problem with the view is that it makes moral rules seem kind of weird, right? There are these sort of magic rules in the sky, is what a former student called them. There are these rules in the sky that are somehow part of the universe, but are seemingly unlike every other aspect of the universe, right? They aren't physical things, and they're not quite mathematical things either. Math feels tied to the world in a way that, if I have 2 pens and then I get a third pen, all right, 2 pens, 1 pen, 3 pens. Like, you can sort of see math in that way, but you can't quite see morality in the same way. Moral rules aren't physical things, and they don't determine what actually does happen the way that the laws of physics, the rules of physics dictate what does happen. Moral rules dictate what should happen, right? There are rules built into the universe, but unlike physical laws and mathematical laws, they're rules that can be violated. And that's a very weird kind of rule to be built into the universe in the same sort of way. Moral truths are a sort of value built into actions and maybe objects. I don't know if an object can have moral worth, but let's say it can. So it's a sort of moral value built into actions and objects. And it's this value that's independent of our judgments about them. So it's a value that's independent of whether or not we value it. Right? Most things that are valuable because people value them. But the moral value of an action or an object would have to be independent of whether or not anyone actually values it. And that's an odd sort of value. That's an odd sort of thing to be built into the world. It's this sort of objective rule that's different from every other kind of, all the physical laws, all the mathematical laws. It's different from all of those kinds of laws because they can be violated. Moral rules don't determine what actually happens. People do immoral things all the time. So they're rules built into the universe, but they can be violated, unlike all the other rules. It's just sort of this value. Some things are good, some things are bad. Whereas math and physics, gravity doesn't tell you how much mass is good or how much mass is bad. It's just there's an amount of mass, and this is the strength of gravity, in this region with this amount of mass. It's a very different thing. And so some people think that it's just sort of a weird kind of thing to believe in. Moral rules are a whole new category of stuff in the world. And so maybe it's a simpler, cleaner view of the world to just eliminate them and say moral rules aren't this like objective part of the universe. We cut that out of our picture of the universe entirely, and then we become relativists or subjectivists and say morality comes from us, which is easier to get a handle on. So maybe that's a problem for moral realism. Maybe moral rules are just a weird thing to believe in. But another problem for the view is that it's hard to explain how we come to know moral truths, right? So this is sort of an epistemic problem. Moral truths are part of the world, but it looks like we can't learn about them empirically. You can't go out and figure out what's right just by studying the world around you. And you can't prove it with quite as much certainty as you can prove mathematical truths. When you make a moral judgment, where does that come from? It feels like it just sort of comes from inside you, like you have this intuition. You have these answers, which is an odd sort of thing that you just have this innate knowledge. We don't have innate knowledge of science or computers or art or food. We don't, a newborn baby doesn't seem like it knows a lot yet. But it's not clear how and when you could ever learn about what's really morally right between being a baby and being an adult. Because David Hume was a Scottish philosopher who said, seeing what is the case doesn't ever tell you what ought to be the case. And morality is fundamentally not about what is the case. Morality is about what ought to be the case. And looking around the world and seeing what's happening doesn't automatically tell you what should be happening, which is what morality is about. So how do we know which moral claims are true? I mean, we're all taught morality by parents and teachers and other people when we're children, and they were taught it from other people and who were taught it by other people, going on and on. But at some point, that chain has to end. We have to be able to explain how people came to discover moral truths in the first place. We can explain that with science and math. Someone made the mathematical proof that proved that some claim was true, and that's how we discovered it. Someone did whatever experiment and got whatever result, and that's how we learned that gravitational waves exist and that there are elements with such and such atomic mass and so on. We can go back with science and math and other forms of knowledge and point to when we as a species discovered it, when we found out it was true, where our knowledge of it really comes from. But it's not clear how we do that with morality, right? It's not clear how we can explain how we learned about morality in the first place. And that's a tricky question that the moral realist has to answer. And it looks like the moral realist is going to have to propose something like this moral faculty of reasoning, some just special power in our minds to find and recognize moral truths that's fundamentally different from how we find and recognize mathematical truths and physical truths and other sorts of truths. And it's not clear how that sort of faculty would work. And it's not clear, in that case, it's not clear why people disagree about morality. If we all have this same ability to find out the truth, then why are there any moral disagreements? It's a very strange sort of mental power to say that we have. But it looks like the moral realist might have to say we have just some special mental power to find out the moral truths, which are already sort of weird things in the world. And that's just a sort of weirdness. And so a lot of the objections to moral realism are built on what odd features of the world objective moral truths would be. It's not quite clear what they are, what these objective moral rules are, how they exist in the world. And it's not clear how we come to discover them, whatever they are. And that's just sort of those are uncomfortable questions that the moral realist has to answer. All right. But so we've talked a little bit about moral realism. Now I'm going to stop the video. And in the next video, we will talk about moral relativism. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.